The plane was ready for takeoff, passengers settling into their seats, when tension suddenly filled the cabin. One woman refused to sit in her assigned seat, insisting she couldn't sit next to a black man. Whispers spread quickly through the rows, and a sense of unease rippled across the cabin. The man, calm but visibly uncomfortable, tried to reason with her, but she refused to budge. Flight attendants exchanged worried glances, unsure how to handle the escalating situation without creating chaos. A simple seating issue had suddenly turned into a confrontation that threatened the safety and peace of everyone on board. The pilot's voice crackled over the intercom, and the crew made a call that would change the course of the flight. What happened next left everyone stunned. Security was called, and the cabin went silent as passengers held their breath, watching the drama unfold. No one expected what was about to happen, and the woman's reaction would shock everyone, leaving the entire plane in disbelief. In a matter of minutes, a routine flight became a story passengers would never forget. But the real question remained: how did one call resolve a situation that seemed impossible to handle? The answer would leave jaws dropping. The man in the seat, quiet but composed, had been traveling for work, carrying nothing but a small briefcase and a laptop. He had flown countless times before, yet nothing had prepared him for this moment. Around him, passengers shifted uncomfortably, some glancing nervously at the crew, others whispering to each other, wondering how a simple seating disagreement had spiraled into something much bigger. The woman, visibly agitated, kept insisting she couldn't sit there. Her voice grew louder, drawing the attention of more passengers, while the flight attendants tried to calm her down. The tension in the cabin was thick, and for a few moments it felt like time had slowed. Every passenger seemed to hold their breath, caught in a moment that teetered between routine and chaos. In the cockpit, the pilot had made the discreet call to airport security, a move that hinted at the seriousness of the situation. The crew exchanged hurried whispers, their eyes darting back and forth, knowing that how this unfolded could change the entire flight experience. Meanwhile, passengers began to speculate who was at fault, what would happen next, and most importantly, how could a situation that seemed so personal escalate into something that involved security on a plane mid? The answers were coming, but no one knew how shocking they would be. Passengers shifted in their seats, some pulling out phones to record, others whispering to loved ones about what was unfolding. The man, still calm, tried to focus on his laptop, but the tension made every keystroke feel impossible. He glanced around, noticing the fear and curiosity in the eyes of fellow travelers. Some were angry, some confused, and a few looked guilty for even watching. The cabin had become a stage for something much larger than a seating dispute. It was a test of patience, authority, and human decency. The woman, refusing to relent, started pacing near the aisle, her frustration escalating. Flight attendants approached her cautiously, offering solutions and trying to explain that the seating was assigned for safety, not preference. Her answers were defiant, creating an invisible barrier between her and the rest of the passengers. Meanwhile, murmurs about racial tension and fairness filled the air. Some passengers sided with the man silently, while others debated whether the crew could have handled it differently. From the cockpit, the pilot kept a careful eye on the unfolding drama, aware that every decision now could affect the entire flight. Airport security was on standby, but time was ticking, and every second added to the suspense. The conflict was no longer just about one seat, had become a story about courage, confrontation, and the invisible lines that define respect and safety in a confined space. Everyone knew this situation was far from over, and the next move would change everything. The atmosphere in the cabin had shifted from tense to electric. Passengers leaned forward in their seats, craning their necks to catch every word, every movement. The woman's voice had risen to a near shout, her insistence growing louder with each passing second. Flight attendants moved carefully between rows, trying to de-escalate the situation without provoking her further. The man remained seated, his expression calm but eyes sharp, aware that any sudden reaction could escalate things beyond control. Whispers spread like wildfire. Some passengers speculated about the consequences of the woman's refusal, others quietly applauded the man's composure. A few had already called loved ones, describing the scene with a mixture of disbelief and horror. The tension was palpable, a weight pressing down on everyone inside the plane. In the cockpit, the pilot's hand hovered over the radio, ready to communicate with ground security. He could feel the urgency, the fragile balance between a routine flight and a full-blown incident. Crew members exchanged worried glances, knowing that the next few minutes would determine how this confrontation would end. Suddenly, the woman's agitation reached a fever pitch. She stood in the aisle, blocking movement, refusing to cooperate, her anger boiling over. The plane seemed to hold its breath. Every eye was on her, and the man she refused to sit next to, as if the next moment could explode into chaos. Time felt suspended, and the cabin waited, tense and silent, for what would happen next. Just as the cabin seemed to teeter on the edge, a sudden announcement from the cockpit changed everything. The pilot's voice, calm but firm, instructed the passengers to remain seated and assured them that airport security was already en route. But before anyone could fully process that, the woman dropped a bombshell. She claimed she had a medical issue that made her unable to sit in a particular spot. The crew paused, trying to navigate this new complication, while passengers exchanged confused glances. The situation had just become far more complicated. Meanwhile, whispers about the man's calm demeanor started turning into speculation. Some passengers wondered if he had a connection to the airline or some authority figure on board. Others, still shocked by the woman's behavior, felt the tension spike even higher. The man remained silent, but the subtle tightening of his jaw hinted that he was more aware of the unfolding drama than anyone realized. Flight attendants moved quickly, trying to reconcile the woman's sudden claim with the seating assignment, but the air in the cabin had grown thick with anxiety. Security was minutes away, but the delay felt unbearable. Every eye followed the woman as she continued her standoff, and passengers held their breath, sensing that the next few moments could push the conflict into uncharted territory. The tension had escalated beyond a simple seating dispute. It had become a high-stakes drama no one could ignore. Just as the tension in the cabin reached a breaking point, the sound of footsteps approached from the front of the plane. Two uniformed security officers stepped onto the aisle, their presence commanding immediate attention. The woman froze, her defiance faltering as the crew calmly explained that she would need to follow them off the plane. Murmurs rippled through the passengers. It seemed the standoff was coming to an end. The man remained seated, his calm demeanor never wavering, earning quiet nods and appreciative glances from those around him. Flight attendants guided the woman toward the exit, and as she reluctantly moved, passengers began to exhale collectively, relief spreading through the cabin. The chaos that had threatened the flight's safety was finally under control, and the man's patience and composure had quietly restored order. But just as it seemed the crisis had passed, the final twist came. As the security officers escorted the woman down the aisle, she looked back with a startled expression, pointing toward a note left on her seat, one that revealed the man wasn't just any passenger. He was a respected member of the airline safety committee. On a surprise inspection flight, monitoring protocol and passenger behavior, the revelation sent a shiver through the cabin. What started as a simple seat dispute had turned into a lesson in accountability and respect, leaving every passenger with a story they would never forget. With the woman finally escorted off the plane, the cabin slowly returned to a sense of normalcy. Passengers adjusted in their seats, some exchanging quiet conversations about what had just happened, others still shaking their heads in disbelief. The man, still calm and composed, quietly gathered his belongings and smiled politely at the crew, who had handled the situation with professionalism and care. His presence, once a point of tension, had become a reminder of patience and dignity in the face of conflict. Flight attendants moved down the aisles, checking on passengers and offering reassurance. The murmurs turned into soft laughter and shared relief as people reflected on the chaos that had unexpectedly united them. Even for a brief moment, the pilot, once tense, finally relaxed as the plane resumed its journey. The earlier confrontation now behind them, passengers couldn't help but discuss the final revelation about the man's role with the airline safety committee. It was a surprising twist that changed their perspective entirely. What had begun as a heated confrontation over a seat had evolved into a story about respect, accountability, and the quiet courage of those who handled difficult situations with composure. By the time the plane landed, every passenger carried a new understanding of human decency, and a story that would be retold for years.